driving force that turned into bloodshed and putsch. It was refuted and rejected by citizens of other regions of Ukraine. At the same time, this Euromaidan marched through Kiev. And today it would be appropriate to ask a question: what exactly Euromaidan gave to Ukraine and to its people? Did their dream of European integration came true? The answer is clear. It used to be a self-sufficient industrial and densely populated republic of the former Soviet Union. Now it has turned into an impoverished, extinct territory. It has lost its independence. It is funded by Western colonizers, which define its domestic and foreign policy. And let me call spade a spade. They embezzle money using Ukraine, but after this money laundering, money turned bloody red. It became normal for Ukraine to have large-scale human rights violations, to have discrimination of its citizens on ethnic and linguistic grounds. There is the rampage of corruption, and lawlessness is triumphant. At full swing is the totalitarian repressive machine to oppose dissent, and hardly Ukrainians that took to the streets on the so-called Maidan in November 2013 could imagine the tragic consequences. They paid a high price for their European choice, as they believed back in the day. You know what's the trick? Ukraine has always been part of Europe. It's a part of the continent. It's the European part of the Eurasian space. In literature, in culture, it has always been Europe in its traditions. But they were told, no, you have never been a part of Europe, but you can successfully invest and become a part of Europe. That's what they done. They have invested a great deal of human lives. Moving on to the current developments, and let us call a spade a spade. These are the repercussions of Euromaidan. It's not about a corruption scandal, corruption case, not at all. These are repercussions of the destroyed statehood of Ukraine through external governance, uncontrolled flow of money and weapons, and lack of any accountability under any modalities. New atrocious details of this scandal are becoming public, but actually we're talking about outright mafia clique, atrocious murderous shenanigans. Due to many leaks, embezzlers on the Bankover Street use quite sophisticated models of seizing funds of their allies. There is a great deal of materials that were made public, and they give food for thought. We're talking about huge money laundering by purchasing Western-sponsored drones at the exorbitant prices. The majority of these drones are destroyed by Russian air defense, and pocketing the money of sponsors that are sent to rebuild the damaged energy infrastructure, but actually they end up in private accounts. The funding for weapons and energy flow into the same hands. Now Zelensky and his partners in crime try to make excuses. Traditionally, surprising as it may seem, they blame everything on the Kremlin. That's the one who is to blame. However, rank-and-file Ukrainians do not buy it. And we wanted it to happen much earlier, but it's best to have it now than never. According to the opinion polls, 73 respondents believe that the corruption has increased significantly over the past 4 years. We're talking about 4 years of war. And a quarter of respondents believe that Verkhovna Rada, and Zelensky is to blame. 62% support the resignation of Yermak from his post. And given the current developments, these figures could be even much more negative for the Kiev regime. According to Ukrainian sources, the so-called Mindich case made Zelensky ratings drop and plummet. Currently, this rating stands at no more than 20%, and I believe this is the kind of indicator where Zelensky could even be much more successful, so to speak, than his friends in Europe, Emmanuel Macron, Keir Starmer, Friedrich Merz. They set these anti-records. The Western party of war, as if nothing happened, continue reckless military and financial funneling of the Kiev regime. On the 13th of November, NATO published a decision of Scandinavian and Baltic countries to allocate $500 million to procure American weaponry. Within this initiative, and I name it the Prioritized Ukraine Requirements List. According to this list, these are no medications or humanitarian assistance, not at all. No education, economic growth, or any kind of development, not at all. We're talking about something that can kill as many Ukrainians as possible. Kill them ultimately. That is something NATO gives money for. On the 14th of November, Defense Minister of Germany, Boris Pistorius, announced Berlin's intention to dip into its pocket once again and to add some 150 million euros. Clearly, the fear of Western establishment to recognize that their project has failed and completely lose trust of the deceived taxpayers prevails over common sense. On the 14th of November, the EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, the post occupied by Kaja Kallas, in her statement at the press conference of defense ministers of Germany, the UK, Poland, Italy, and France in Berlin, thanked Germany for its decision to increase the annual support to Kiev to 11.5 billion euros. Reportedly, this saves lives of Ukrainians and sets an example for the rest of Europe. What kind of an example does it set, I dare ask? Kaja Kallas hypocritically accused Russia of not wishing to have negotiations. Just the other day, first, the Deputy Foreign Minister of Ukraine stated that they withdrew from any negotiating processes with Russia, and immediately, Kaja Kallas claims that Russia allegedly abandoned negotiations. When? When was it made exactly? What was the date of this decision? She called to increased funding for Ukraine in 2026, including at the expense of frozen Russian assets. And without even blinking, she called assistance to Ukraine a good deal compared to the price of victory of Russia. That is something atrocious. Only a monster can think in these terms. I've always believed, frankly speaking, that a woman in politics, especially since she has kids, understands the price of her words. She can project everything she says to her experience of being a mother. She can use these logic and she can put it into practice to project it to the life of her family and kids. And Kaja Kallas is a woman, and she said that that is a good deal compared to the price of Russian victory. Why is it a good deal? Is it a good deal in terms of the number of Ukrainians killed? And another surreal statement was made by another Russophobe, Andrius Kubilius, on the 17th of November at the Conference on Defense in Lithuania. He said that It is necessary to establish peace with the Ukrainian army that has combat experience and to deploy them in Lithuania together with German brigade and rotating American troops.
He said that Ukrainian Nazis are to become, quotation, a guarantee of security before the threat of a Russian attack on Europe, end of quote. How do they imagine that? After peace, how will that happen? Because peace would mean that the sides take obligations not to carry out any hostilities. So after the sides agree on that, the Ukrainian army will relocate to another side of the European continent. And then you will just need to burn the torch. Because the most rabid Euro vultures, Zelensky signed an agreement with Macron for 10 years that includes the purchase of 100 Rafale multi-combat aircraft and 8 SMPT air defense systems. Zelensky qualified this document as historical. Maybe some aspect he is right, because this document will remain in history. It's not even a deal, it's a declaration of intention. Because it's about 20 billion euro purchase, and the Kiev regime does not have the money for such a large purchase. And Paris does not have the equipment mentioned in this agreement. So one side does not have the money, the other side does not have the goods, but they have agreed on something for the future. So one of the largest scams in modern history is looming. Even when it is shipped, even if someday it is delivered, it will be a threat for our security. So on the 18th of November, Zelensky visited Spain, and Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez announced a new military aid package for Kiev, totaling 615 million euros, almost a half of which will go towards the supply of air defense missiles and other defense equipment. Madrid also pledged to ensure security in Europe and strengthen defense industry and supporting Ukrainian military equipment manufacturers. So it has a hidden agenda. It's no secret that Zelensky's sponsors are demanding increased mobilization, primarily by lowering the draft age. The Europeans, in replenishing the Ukrainian armed forces' losses, they are primarily concerned about preventing a new influx of refugees from Ukraine. In order to relieve themselves from the burden of those who were fortunate enough to leave Ukraine, of those people. So it's about tightening the conditions of obtaining asylum. They just spent time there on the territory of European countries. They were fed there like a pig, and then to slaughter them. It's just monstrous. They need them not like refugees, not even like their own citizens, not people who are temporarily on the territory of a foreign state, only as expendable material, as an instrument for implementing their own tasks. Now let us see what is happening in the Ukrainian armed forces. It's about demoralization and disillusionment. The Aftenposten media has published a report from this town of Izum, where an Azov fighter from the 3rd Separate Assault Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces described the demotivating effect of the mass exodus of 18 to 22-year-old Ukrainians abroad, the exodus of soldiers. So he called on Norway and other European countries to return those people home, if not to send them to the battlefield, at least to work and live. Otherwise, who and what would they fight for? So that's the question to the one interviewed, for the one interviewed. Just the citizens of Ukraine ask this question of who and what do you fight for? For Zelensky to become richer and to launder that money for those who is supplying them for him from the West. Of course, in order to use Ukraine as an instrument to counter Russia, yes, certainly, but primarily, if we have a look at the Ukrainian territory, all this story, it has only one purpose. The purpose of getting richer for those who are an instrument in the hands of the West. An instrument to get back all those tranches, an instrument for geopolitical games. There are no other reasons. That's what the people are sent by those officials on Bankova, sent to participate in meat storms. So does the person who was interviewed has a soul? I cannot tell you that. But in the official statistics, the rate of desertion from the Ukrainian armed forces has increased almost 44-fold, from 3,687 people in 2022 to 161,461 people in 2025. It's an indicator of the growth of desertion from the Ukrainian armed forces. That's how the Ukrainian citizens are running from the front line. On the 15th of November, in an interview with the Ukrainian television NTA, Roman Kostenko, a member of the Verkhovna Rada Defense Committee, noted that given the acute shortage of people in the Ukrainian armed forces, both psychologically and morally, quotation, there will soon be another army of voluntary deserters that will have to be reckoned with, end of quote. According to him, approximately 26,500 Ukrainians mobilized monthly. Just think about it. Of 26,500 Ukrainians, more than 21,000 become deserters. I would remind you, this person is a member of the Verkhovna Rada Defense Committee. So that's the data provided by the person who is aware of what he is talking about. He has the facts. Currently, the Verkhovna Rada discusses legislative amendments to further tighten forced mobilization, abolishing free travel for young people abroad or lowering the recruitment age to 23 or even to 18 years, and revising the reservation conditions. Their possible adoption would only exacerbate the situation and increase the outflow of Ukrainians who have so far escaped the fate of cannon fodder. These facts confirm the urgency of the tasks of denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine and the elimination of threats coming from its territory. All these goals will certainly be achieved, as it has been repeatedly stated by Russian officials. And regarding the resolution draft, the draft of the resolution about human rights in the temporarily occupied territories, as they call it, of Ukraine, including the Autonomous Republic of Crimea and the city of Sevastopol. It's the unjustified, unfounded claims by the Kiev regime. It's actually torn from the reality, and 14 countries were in solidarity with us on this document. So its document sponsors once again failed to achieve the consensus approval of this document. And over 90 states rejected this draft resolution. This long text is in the worst traditions of the public rhetoric and political inventions by the Kiev regime. They failed to propose anything new in essence, and it's just accusing our country, accusing Russia. Let us have a look at the examples, blatant examples of unprecedented cynicism and lack of principles. Are the formed concerns, so-called concerns about alleged systematic violations. It's just ridiculous by Russian authorities of the rights of ethnic and religious minorities, primarily the Crimean Tatars. Has anyone just talked to them? Has anyone talked to them at all? Someone among those who has launched this text of the resolution. It's just a false idea included into the document, quotation to provide conditions for education in Ukrainian and Crimean Tatar languages and to stop the blocking of access to Ukrainian education that is qualified as systematic racial discrimination. Just pay attention to that. The initiators of the adopted resolution, they just do not see any problems in the targeted repressive policy of de-Russification of their own countries carried out by the Kiev regime. The creation of a mono-ethnical Ukrainian state that has no place for Russians. It's just according to the mood of the Ukrainian president. It's violation of human rights. This policy since 2018 on elimination of the canonical Ukrainian Orthodox Church, its persecutions, harassment, killings we have mentioned today. Also violence against believers, parishioners, physical violence, up to murders of clergy members, seizure of church property, desecration of holy places. It's the decision of the International Court of Justice of the United Nations of January 21st, 2024 on the implementation of the provisions of the International Convention for the Suppression of the Financing of Terrorism and the International Convention on the Elimination of all forms of racial discrimination, and the call to implement the decision of the International Court of Justice ruling of the 16th of March 2022. So it's just absurd actions by the Ukrainian officials. And the Zelensky regime is just projecting the situation in his own country to our country. It has been violation of the freedom of speech, clearing the political landscape from competitors, intimidation of journalists, human rights activists, bloggers. Just do you remember one of the people one person participating in negotiations, he came back to Ukraine and he was shot. So it just happened. It was an unclear situation. There are cases of kidnapping, violent disappearance and torture against Russian prisoners of war. It's mass human rights violations. It's inhuman Kiev dictatorship. This rapidly degrading situation with the protection of human rights in Ukraine has become largely possible due to connivance and tacit approval of Western countries. It's just violence and lawlessness. And the Russian Federation is committed to its international human rights obligations, including on the territory of Crimea, Sevastopol, the Donetsk and the Lugansk People's Republics. It's the Russian legislation in force that guarantees all citizens their rights, the rights to labor, healthcare, and others. And international treaties of the Russian Federation are in place there. The residents enjoy all the human rights and freedoms without discriminations in comparison with the residents of other regions of Russia. Regarding languages, it's actually the first time, if we are talking about the new and the modern history, such a package for studying languages, for using languages, for creating media outlets in their own languages. Crimean residents have received those rights with the guarantees by Russia, legally enshrined and actively implemented in practice. This week, at the invitation of the Assembly of the Peoples of the World and the Civic Chamber of Russia, Chilean writer and journalist visited our country. Patricio Maribel, he told about his trip to Donbass. He spoke to human rights activists. He brought humanitarian aid to the Ambrosievka orphanage. He also brought a rose from the Donetsk People's Republic. Actually, those roses, many people have them now. Those roses are made from shrapnel, from shells used by the Ukrainian forces to bomb hospitals, schools and kindergartens in Donetsk. His book explores the fate of the Russian-speaking population in this military conflict. He is telling about the fate of children. It's an attempt to show, to demonstrate the human dimension of the conflict, if we use the international term. But if we talk in simple words, the grief, the suffering of people. And a separate chapter the author has devoted to the crimes of the extremist Ukrainian Azov battalion banned in Russia. The Chilean writer also took part in a number of round-table discussions, and he reiterated his commitment to tell the truth on the international platform and to counter those lies broadcast by European and American media outlets. We are grateful to Patricio Maribel for his honest reporting, despite all attempts by the West to silence it and to distort it.
We continue to follow the developments in Moldova. The authorities of this country use the pretext of Euromaidan, the so-called Euro integration project. They keep the policy to sever ties with Russia and with its people, and it was manifested once again when Moldovan Parliament adopted on the 13th of November in the first reading the bill denouncing Russia-Moldova intergovernmental agreement on the establishment of cultural centers. We're talking about the Russian Science and Culture Center in Chisinau, also known as the Russian House. What is the pretext? Russia might use this agreement, and I quote, as a tool to advance the distorted narratives. They use this terminology. At the same time, Moldovan deputies recognize that the systemic monitoring of the Russian House has not taken place. They use and they made this decision under the highly likely principle. During the session of the parliament, members of the ruling party, the Sandu regime's party, went as far as, well, I do not know how to say it. They accused our prominent poet, Alexander Pushkin, in imposing non-traditional relations in Bessarabia. He came to Bessarabia in the 19th century, and that's how it all started. It's not just Russophobia, it is a mania, schizophrenia, and such statements confirm the general rule. Russophobia and refusal from the Russian culture lead to the loss of common sense and to the health problems, because that is gibberish that is said in the parliament of the country. Moldovans, the citizens of Moldova, made their choice so that these people could champion the interests of citizens of this country, so that they could address urgent matters, so that they would develop laws to benefit their country. No, Pushkin is to blame for everything. That's just funny. There was a episode of our comic show regarding Pushkin, who is to blame for everything, and we used to think that it was a joke, but it was not a joke. It was a scenario for the future of many countries. Meanwhile, the officials in Chisinau continued to cleanse the political landscape of the country from unloyal forces, and the pinnacle was the kangaroo court over the head of Gagauzia Yevgenia Gutsu. It is politicized and it seeks to intimidate the dissent. Probably they will have legal proceedings against Pushkin as well. The integration of the country into Euro-Atlantic entities are in full swing. That's what they are covering with their gibberish. They cannot recognize to their own people that they sacrifice people, the citizens of Moldova, in order to have these handouts, grants, and to ensure the future of only part of the society, the political establishment. As for the rest, they will all be sacrificed. From the 26th of October to 13th of November, Moldova hosted military exercises, Peace Shield 2025, in order to assess skills of the national army in line with the NATO operational capabilities concept before their possible participation in international peacekeeping missions. What kind of an international peacekeeping mission are we talking about? The question begs itself. The citizens of Moldova ask Sandu, what kind of peacekeeping missions can NATO put on its track record? What kind of peacekeeping missions of NATO are we talking about? In Libya, for instance, there were peacekeeping efforts by NATO, which split the country apart, let alone huge losses, massacre and the tragedy that the Libyan people suffers from, let alone the repercussions for Western and Southern Europe. Thousands of Libyan refugees fled from their country via the Mediterranean to Europe. Maybe we can remember another success story for NATO and its peacekeeping missions. Maybe we're talking about the bombing of Yugoslavia that became the beacon of hope. And Sandu guides its own people to follow this example. Although Sandu has a different kind of people, Romanians, Iraq, Afghanistan, we shouldn't even begin this story. NATO has no peacekeeping missions whatsoever that could lead to peacekeeping results. They're only destructive missions of NATO. On the 11th of November, the Defense Ministry of Moldova announced it received another batch of transport vehicles from the European Peace Facility. Moldova is the second recipient of assistance through the so-called pacifist fund after Ukraine. Last year, EU former permanent representative bragged that the support for armed forces of Moldova by EU since 2021 reached 137 million euros. It is all happening amid the economic collapse and the collapse of social sector. Over the 5 years of the ruling party, the Moldovan inflation grew by 66%. The GDP had 0% growth, including its financial assistance. The industry has dropped by 4.2%. Agriculture has decreased by 13.5%. Probably Alexander Pushkin is also to blame for that. He once came to Bessarabia. The helplessness and incompetence of the Chisinau regime became obvious for the Western sponsors, and the red flag was the decision by the IMF to block the latest tranche, 170 million USD, due to non-compliance with fiscal policy and governance. As a result, the authorities had to take loans from France, since it has apparently no problems. Everything is so secured in France that they even steal from the Louvre at daylight. And clearly, this is a failed policy of the budget policy. We regret to state that under the current leadership, Moldova is turning into the territory of poverty and lawlessness, and the people see that, and they vote with their foot by immigrating in more promising countries, including Russia. There were a lot of questions that we have already commented upon. Let me repeat it once again. On the 19th of November, the Foreign Ministry of Poland announced us that the Consul General of Russia in Gdansk shall stop its operation. Previously, in November 2024 and June 2025, Russian Consulate General in Poznan and Krakow ceased to operate, and we believe that it is a hostile step that seeks to destabilize and destroy bilateral relations amid the caveman Russophobia in Poland. Certainly the Russian side will respond appropriately, and we will limit the Polish consular diplomatic presence in Russia. Cambodia-Thailand situation. We express concern over the recent exacerbation of the border conflict between the two countries. Hopefully, as a result of a dialogue, bilaterally, the countries would resume the implementation of the joint declaration that was signed on the 26th of October in Kuala Lumpur. We stand for addressing all disputes solely by peaceful means. Such territorial disputes are the result of the colonial policy of the West. Amid severe degradation in security in the Asia-Pacific, it is especially important to act within the spirit of unity and solidarity for ASEAN to overcome historical differences. Djibouti. I can say that there have been Russian Days of Culture as part of the state program to advance the Russian language abroad of the Culture Ministry of Russia, Roskoncert, Roskino, with the support of the Russian Embassy in Djibouti. We held a number of events that seek to familiarize the foreign audience with Russian cultural legacy. These Russian Culture Days took place from the 15th to 17th of November in the People's Palace of Djibouti. There were artists of the Moscow People's Choir, as well as workshops on the Russian language. The events were attended by the Prime Minister, Minister for Youth and Culture, Higher Education Minister, representatives of political circles, media, diplomatic corps, and our compatriots. And the significant part of the audience were Djibouti's school children and students. The invited officials and guests praised the high artistic professionalism of Russian artists, and these events were broadly covered in the media outlets. The successful Russian Culture Days once again confirmed the importance of this format on the African continent and our commitment to develop bilateral cooperation in culture and education. Starting with mid-September, Mali has been experiencing fuel crisis due to systemic attacks by fighters of pro-Al-Qaeda JNAIM group. We're talking about attacks on car convoys that provide fuel to the capital. We're talking about supplies from Senegal and Côte d'Ivoire. The jihadists spread fake news in order to sow mass discontent among common citizens and to mount pressure on the transitional government in Mali. Currently, the African Corps of the Russian MOD has been actively working on the ground. We have organized the checkpoints at the routes of the convoys. The fighters of terrorist groups suffer severe losses. Lately, there's been a decrease in this fuel crisis in Mali. Russia intends to further provide assistance to the friendly people of Mali when it comes to overcoming their hurdles so that they would ensure their independent, sustainable development. A lot has been said about that. But actually, our country pays special attention to that. You know, on the 20th of November, we mark the 18 years since the start of the work of the international military trials in Nuremberg. It is an unparalleled judicial process that condemned the main military criminals of the Third Reich. The rulings of the trial made a significant contribution formalizing legally the outcome of World War II. It recognizes as a crime the hate ideology and the Nazi practice, and this ruling cannot be appealed neither from legal or from political standpoint. The role of Nuremberg cannot be overestimated. The trial, its charter, and the ruling became the stepping point to shape the norms of the international criminal law. Our country was at the origins of the trial. The Soviet Union was the first to shape the concept of the international process against Nazi criminals, and from day one of the war, it shaped standards for a just proceedings. It is universally recognized that the crimes of Nazi do not have the expiry date, and unfortunately for several years we have been witnessing unscrupulous attempts to rewrite history, to put into oblivion the lessons of Nuremberg, to mar the actions of the USSR and the Red Army. And Europe is breeding neo-Nazi movements sweepingly, building upon this framework. There were countries that were liberated by the Red Army from this complete inhumane destruction by fascists and Nazis. Previously, there were monuments to honor heroes, and currently they demolished these monuments, and these memorials are replaced by monuments to honor representatives of ideology of racial supremacy. There are former SS members' marches, and the most radical forms take place in Ukraine and in the Baltic states. As you might know, the Russian Foreign Ministry repeatedly calls not to forget the lessons of the past. You should realize that rewriting history and the complicity to neo-Nazis inevitably can lead to mounting threat of repeating the greatest strategy of the 20th century. To mark the 80th anniversary of the trial, Exhibition Hall Manege is hosting the International Forum Nuremberg 80 years. Foreign Minister Lavrov sent a video address. Tomorrow, the 21st of November, there will be a sectoral session within this forum. It is dedicated to the international legal and diplomatic dimension of the Nuremberg trials, the role in shaping of post-war world order, the importance of preserving historical truth and confronting attempts to falsify history. That is the reason why I postponed the briefing, because I've just come from the Manege exhibition hall and I participated in the session on the media coverage of the Nuremberg trials. We're talking about this huge exhibition in the Manege hall. Can you believe it? We have recreated the hall where the Nuremberg trial took place, with the flags of the countries of the anti-Hitler coalition that served justice on behalf of the people of the world. And there were benches where criminals were sitting. There were places for secretaries, for those who took notes, and there are live stories and witness accounts of those who spent a lot of days and years studying this case. Scientists, academics came, as well as children of those who participated in the trials, who covered the work of the Nuremberg trials. I have no doubt that the materials of these 2 days of the conference will be part of an interactive exhibition on the internet, and that they would be accessible to the broadest audience. That is something truly grand, and it is decent for the memory of those who served justice over Nazism and fascism on behalf of the people and countries. Today, on the 20th of November, the BRICS Municipalities Forum takes place. Over the past years, the forum has gained credibility. The platform is an efficient tool to strengthen partnership in implementing joint projects at the regional and municipal levels. The event was praised by the BRICS Summit Declaration in 2020 and in 2024. According to organizers, this year the forum will bring together 5,000 participants from 76 countries, including 700 speakers, including heads of cities, experts, and business communities. The program includes 10 sections. Namely, participants will discuss the artificial intelligence, digital transformation, neural networks, industrial technologies of the future, science, education, logistics, cultural exchange, tourism. They will focus on investment projects presentation. The discussions will focus on improving living standards, providing sustainable cities development, as well as building humanitarian contacts.
The outcome of this event will be practical decisions aimed at new partnership, concluding commercial deals, strengthening the existing connections that make the BRICS countries, cities, the centers of growth and balanced development. one more event that has been carried out. I would like to highlight that in the city of Vangsai, there was a ceremony of anti-mine center of the Russian Federation. Another stage of works of unexploded munitions that have remained from the time of the aggression of the United States in Indochina. It's the 1960s, 1970s. From 1964 to 1973, U.S. aircraft carried out actually 500,000 of combat sorties over Laos territory, dropping 3 million tons of bombs and cluster munitions. Around 30% of those mines remained unexploded. They continued to pose a serious threat to local residents and hinder the normalization of economic activities in the affected areas. In total, since 2018, Russian and Lao specialists have demined more than 208 hectares. Russian specialists have assisted in training of 164 Lao People's Army engineering specialists. It plays an important part in demining and going back to normal life. It's an important role of Russian specialists who pass the experience to Lao colleagues. We will continue to carry out this humanitarian mission and continue to form the conditions of development of friendly Laos with whom we enjoy the relations of a strategic partnership. Now it's about the the successful concert of Moscow Synodal Choir in Italy. The organizer of this event was the Foundation for the Support of Sacred Music and Art that is closely affiliated with the Vatican. Also, the concert was carried out with the support of our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Culture, as concert, and the Moscow Patriarchate. The honorary president of this fund, Mario Grech, was present, as well as ambassadors and diplomats from Belarus, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Serbia, Hungary, some countries of Latin America and Africa, and priests from Russian Orthodox Church and journalists. I would like to highlight the professionalism of this choir, and we actually welcome its return to Rome. It's the confirmation of the enduring significance of Russian cultural heritage. The recent event has become extraordinary. It vividly demonstrated the futility of those attempts, as they say, to cancel Russian culture and to sever the close spiritual ties that exist between the Vatican, Italy, and Russia. And we are especially grateful to the festival organizers for this fruitful collaboration. And I'm ready to answer your questions. Is международная жизнь, international life, with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. Hello. How would you comment on the publications about the Foreign Ministry of Montenegro declaring Russian ambassador Alexander Lukashek accusing him of interference in the domestic affairs of the country? So unfortunately, it's just another case of some sick reaction So just any statement by a Russian diplomat, it causes such reaction, similar reaction. There are just two ways. One way is just not to provide some comments, not to publish interviews. And the second one is to start hysteria after some comments have been issued. It's just narratives that are destructive for Western Europeans, for Anglo-Saxons. Their heads just filled with some rubbish. It's just their input into the Russophobic campaign. They're distorting facts, they're hiding them, they deprive their own public of legal access to objective information, to alternative assessment. Like in an interview by Sergei Lavrov to Corriere della Sera media outlet, when he provided the talking points very important for the Italian public. In a distorted way, they are provided to the Italians by the top officials of this country. He just accompanied these facts with a special comment that he thinks that they will be useful for the Italian public in order to understand this situation. And this part was cut from the interview as well. Russian representatives are the source that the Westerners would like just to ban, to stop. This approach is not right. It's dangerous for themselves. To live in such a simulator in the world of fakes and post-truth, it's dangerous for those who are inside primarily. And those actions against diplomats are contrary to international practice, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948, and is contrary to the corresponding the relevant conventions, the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations. Diplomats should just make public to the wide audience the position of his country without any offenses, without any violation of the legislation of his co-host country and so on, but to convey this information about the steps of his own country, especially international affairs and bilateral affairs. If someone does not agree, they should counter within the framework of discussion with arguments, and not just tearing this interview from publications, from newspapers, deleting it from the internet, inventing some fairy tales that there is no place on the servers, and offense against the speaker. Thank you. One more question, if you allow me. Recently in Armenia, but you know why they are doing it. We also face interviews published in the Russian information segment, Russian speaking or having a Russian license. We have interviews of foreign activists, politicians, diplomats, ambassadors, to whom we have questions, questions by the public, by governmental authorities, ministries. We just publish arguments against them, or we address the editor, as it is done in civilized states. And those who have just taught us the freedom of speech, they just do not publish it. They just take some illegal measures. And thank you very much. Another question. Recently, Armenian authorities denied entry to Russian war correspondent Dmitry Seleznov, who was covering the conflict in Karabakh. They did it without explanation. How can you comment on this? So they used to make statements about pluralism, transparency, and so on, and just let us see the result. Dmitry Seleznov was denied entry to Armenia. So whether the journalist is accused of any crimes on the territory of the Republic, and we have not received information how this ban can be lifted. But it's well known that in 2022, Dmitry Seleznov reported on Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. Our embassy in Yerevan requested information about the reasons for such a decision. And we hope it is not connected with the journalist activities of Dmitry Seleznov, because that was not correlate with the image of Armenia as a democratic state. And the freedom of speech is just the freedom of the press. It's just characteristics of any true democracy. So is Anadolu with us? So I would ask once again, is Anadolu with us? Yes, yes, please. So we have a question about Kiev declaring the renewal of the process of prisoners of war exchange with the mediatorship of Turkey and the United Arab Emirates. Is it possible? Does it mean that the direct negotiations process is becoming an indirect process? And does it mean there will be no direct negotiations between Russia and Ukraine in the near future? So I would answer no, because it does not mean that at all. And we have had direct negotiations. Russia has had direct negotiations. There was an exchange of the detained prisoners of war with the goodwill of mediators, and there were both cases. You can have a look at our website. We usually thanked those countries. If that was verified with them, it was agreed upon with them, those countries who have acted as mediators these years. Please do not make such incorrect conclusions. And I would like to highlight that all contexts of prisoners of war exchange, it was within the scope of the relevant profile structures. And our diplomats accompanied them, provided diplomatic assistance, but the main role was played by the relevant structures. And if any agreements are reached, we will provide diplomatic assistance to the exchange process, and we will inform you on that. And another question, if you allow me. The Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu visited the territories of Syria occupied by the Israeli troops. So my question is, how does Moscow assess this visit from the point of view of Syrian sovereignty? Actually, I will have a look at this piece of news, and I will request the comment by our experts, because I cannot comment right now. I have not seen those reports, and I will come back to you with our comments. Thank you. Thank you. Is RIA Novosti with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. Christina Rodriguez, RIA Novosti. We have two questions today. First of all, I would like you to comment a number of interviews published both in Azerbaijani and Armenian media in connection with the 5th anniversary of the end of the Second Karabakh War, including Russia's role in the events of that time. What can you say about those interviews? Actually, we have also published something on that. On the 7th of November, there was a statement published on our ministry website on the 5th anniversary of signing the ceasefire agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Our position is open. It is consistent. We actually commented this issue during our briefings. We have commented on that many times during our briefings. And I would remind you that thanks to the personal efforts by our President Vladimir Putin, we have restored, we have stopped the bloodshed in Nagorno-Karabakh in 2020 and 2023. Those agreements are still relevant, and they form a roadmap between Baku and Yerevan. And we are ready to cooperate with our partners to assist them in finding the mutually acceptable solutions. Second question, destructive policy of the West in the South Caucasus, particularly it's about Georgia and Armenia. Moldova and Ukraine are held up by the EU as role models for accession as candidate for EU membership. How would you comment on that? So Ukraine and Moldova can be held up as examples only to those who you hate. It's only possible in that case if they hate them. But that's a fact, actually. Just have a look what they are doing with Georgia under hypocritical pretexts. It's about alleged protection of democracy. They are trying to engage them in their political games. Is that consistent desire? So threats have just become commonplace in the region. It's about sanctions and blackmail of the total people. So Georgians have their arms twisted in attempts to protect their own sovereignty, not for coalition, not for supporting someone, but for the people of that states just deciding to live according to its own laws in their own country. It's just obvious that the will of citizens, it could just mean anything for the EU members only when its outcome allows to make a pawn out of a country in a bigger game. So the EU are just allowed actually everything, of course, for big sums of money. We have drawn attention to a copy of a letter of a high-ranking official, EU official, of an anti-government statement allegedly for the interests of Georgia that the freedom-loving citizens had to pronounce at another meeting. And one of the opposition figures just read that text received from the EU just exactly in the Georgian language, the text received from Brussels. So they just reveal the mechanics of the EU members in other states. They do not have any right for that. So there is, in conclusion, the more concessions a country makes to the West, the more the Western appetite grows. So as for Armenia, it's heavily supplied with grants, with promises. Russophobia is cultivated. Now it's observation, but actually it's intelligence mission in Armenia. They engage the republic into its own political military orbit. They want to destroy the multi-century friendship of Russian and Armenian people. So just the formula proposed to the South Caucasus countries actually openly, just to be like Moldova and Ukraine, it's anti-advertisement for Euro integration, and they just offered to just aspire to that. To aspire to what? To destroy the Ukrainian economy, the killings, the destruction of its public political life, the destruction of its independence and sovereignty, how citizens of Moldova are rewritten, how they are turned into Romanian citizens. So that should be taken as some role model for the South Caucasus states.
They want to turn them into vessels that are ready to abandon their national interests to benefit their sovereign. And as you know, this accelerated movement towards the EU prompted Ukraine into the abyss in 2013. This imposed Euro integration choice led to a murderous coup, followed by a protracted civil conflict. As a result, instead of a strong European Ukraine, as was promised, we got a degrading, corrupt, totalitarian Nazi state, or basically a terrorist state that carries out terrorist attacks. In Moldova, they enshrined the irreversible European course in 2024 in their constitution, and this gave a green light to Brussels to engage even further with the Republic, to enslave it. And you know what it will all end up with. They will not invest in the economy and education. They will destroy Moldova from within. Despite the constitutionally enshrined neutrality of Moldova, they introduce it into Euro-Atlantic mechanisms and militarization. As a result, the Republic is turning into a home front to provide for the criminal Kiev regime. We should not talk about the economic breakthrough of Moldova. The statistics is real. This policy by the EU only drags the country into the abyss of the crisis, and the investment of the EU is just a third of the budget, but you cannot live only by the injections of funds from abroad, because otherwise you end up being an appendage, or you name it. It's not an independent unit. Against this backdrop, there is an increasing zero tolerance of Euro path on behalf of the population. They impose it to Moldova. They used to impose it to Ukraine. This policy is a disaster for them. Bold News, are you here with us? Hello, Madam Zakharova. Thanks a lot for this opportunity. In Lithuania, there are 43 centers of cybersecurity. There is also a NATO unit in Tallinn, which is in charge of cybersecurity of NATO. We've already said that Western countries are destroying the signs of information presence of Russia. And what role is played by the Baltic cyber centers? This is indeed a advanced experience center of excellence of NATO that is located in Tallinn. That is a training testing ground for offensive operations in digital space. It's no secret that all efforts of this entity are anti-Russian, and the center plays a key role in defense and implementing, developing the so-called hybrid defense policy in cyberspace. And they train these approaches during such exercises as lock shields. They imitate cyber attacks in order to damage the infrastructure of our country. And it is noteworthy that Ukraine joined this center in 2022. How can you deal without it? Military men and security services and hackers that are serving on the Bankover Street get special training there. And this is just a sign that NATO is involved in the cyber attacks that are carried out by the Kiev regime against Russia. They could hardly be possible without the help of the Western mentors. There's no question about that. Thank you. Izvestia, are you here with us? Hello, Madam Zakharova. We have two questions for you. Okay, the first one. You, Prime Minister of Japan, Senator Katie, started the confrontation against Russia from day one of her rule, and the same attitude was shown with regard to China. Japan tried to mount provocations. Russia banned entry to its territory for the 30 Japanese citizens. How will it affect the bilateral relations between Russia and Japan? Let me highlight that probably the new Prime Minister of Japan does not know about that, but we take only response measures. If we're talking about the ban to enter Russia for 30 citizens, this is a response by our part. They were surprised to see Japanese diplomats in this list. I beg your pardon, but Russian diplomats are on the same list by Japan. We just simply took response measures. Judging by the public statements of the Prime Minister of Japan, the unfriendly course of Tokyo against Russia is still preserved, despite the statements by sane politicians, including the ones that used to be prime ministers, and their attitude. They believe that it is detrimental for Japan. Our position has not changed. Rebuilding dialogue with Tokyo is only possible if Tokyo refuses this anti-Russian course, if it stops attempts to deal a blow to Russia-Japanese cooperation, and to unblock bilateral ties. Thank you. A second question, if I may. What's the take of the Foreign Ministry on the situation when Ukrainian authorities talk about cleansing the system, but actually systems are exposed, these models involving hundreds of millions of dollars, engaging people close to Zelensky? Well, it's just not a scandal. That's a story that reveals a massive embezzlement, millions or even billions of dollars that were distributed. I'm talking about weapons that are circulating in black markets, and this led to the political disaster in Ukraine, and the waves of this political shock reached the countries that have supplied the Kiev regime without any verification and audit, without any accounting. They supplied it with weapons and money, and we had no doubts, even before that, Western-bred Kiev regime has long mastered the art of embezzling the huge sums of money, military, financial, economic, and humanitarian assistance. This is the embezzlement of public funds and bribery that we're talking about. Previously, they used to have such problems, but currently the scale is unparalleled. It has become a truly international mafia entity. I'm talking about these representatives on the Bankover Street, and that is something that is closely associated with the governing machine in Ukraine. We're not just talking about individuals that used to steal something. We're talking about systemic driver in the state machine of Ukraine. It is closely linked to the Ukrainian political system, and it has ties with the external political actors. This scandal around the Mindich case exposed the model of stealing many millions allocated by the sponsors to the Kiev regime in order to strengthen its defense capacity, but in reality they used it to fight against Russia, and now we can see this proof of embezzlement, and there will be even more questions regarding Zelensky. But I believe that the citizens of Western countries should ask their governments, first, why do they sponsor the Kiev regime? Secondly, where is the guarantee that this money will not be stolen? Third, where is the audit and verification systems? And fourth, this all has a terrorist component to it, because the Zelensky regime carries out terrorist attacks against civilians and civil infrastructure. Thanks a lot, Madam Zakharova. Thank you. Xinhua News Agency, are you here with us? Hello, Madam Zakharova, Xinhua News Agency. Recently, Japanese Prime Minister made provocative statements regarding Taiwan. She hinted that there is a possible military intervention in the Taiwan Strait. Despite the serious protest by China, Japan has not recognized its mistake. It refused to recall the statements that were made. Such actions by Japan is a serious violation by the international law and the norms of international relations. They significantly undermine the post-war world order. It is at odds with the One China principle and the spirit of four China-Japan political documents. What's your comment on that? Thank you. You said that Japan has not recognized its mistake so far. I'm sorry. Japan has not recognized the outcome of World War II. 80 years have passed. Japan still cannot recognize the outcome of World War II enshrined in the international law. Currently, Russia marks in various formats the 80th anniversary of the Nuremberg trials. You see, these outcomes are sacred to us. Building upon these outcomes, we developed the international law in many aspects. Many notions were formed for the first time there. 80 years on, Japan not just celebrates this date and has some awareness events. It is not willing to recognize all of it, and it's not because it recognizes the outcome of trials that took place in the Far East. Not at all. It does not recognize the outcome of World War II at all whatsoever. And you say that it does not recognize the modern mistakes. Just count 80 years from these mistakes, and we'll see in 80 years' times whether it recognizes these mistakes. We see that lately the Taiwan topic is actively discussed in the international media space, and it has to do with twisting of facts and reality that has nothing to do with the current state of affairs. A number of countries loudly claim their commitment to the One China principle. At the same time, they fuel tension in the Taiwan Strait. They stand in the way of the peaceful reunification of the country. They provide weapon supplies to Taiwan. They fuel separatist mood. They use this Chinese province, Taiwan, as a tool for pressure and geopolitical deterrence of the PRC. The set of tools resembles a lot the ones the West uses regarding Ukraine, that they use in Ukraine. As for the Russian principled stance on Taiwan case, it is well known. It has not been changed. It has been repeatedly enshrined at the summit level. I'm happy to once again repeat it. The Russian side recognizes that Taiwan is a part and parcel of China. We stand against independence of the country in any form. We assume that the Taiwanese case is a domestic affair of China. It has all the legitimate grounds to protect its sovereignty and territorial integrity. Russia strongly condemns the hypocritical stance by the West regarding the PRC on the Taiwan file. As a genuine friend and credible partner of Beijing on the international arena, we are ready to provide firm support when it comes to sovereignty and territorial integrity of China, including Taiwan. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot to you. Reuters, are you here with us? Madam Zakharova, hello. We are here with you. Hello. We would like to ask you to comment on the recent statements by Friedrich Merz, the Chancellor of Germany, at the conference organized by the Süddeutsche Zeitung. He said that the Western world order has come to an end, and the contours of this world order are not clear, and the shaping of the new world order is only possible with the participation of European neighbors of Germany. Is the Russian Foreign Ministry in agreement with that? And what's your vision of the new international security system? Well, for starters, we need to understand what exactly he meant. What did he mean by saying that the ordinary habitual state of affairs has come to an end? If we're talking about the UN-led international world order that is based on the main principles of the United Nations Charter, then we can say that it's not that it is coming to an end or might come to an end. It's that they have done their utmost to dismantle it. If we are talking about this habitual order, that is the order that's been shaped by the West to segregate people, to divide people into those who are entitled to have rights and freedoms, and the ones who can be exploited and used by all means. In this case, he should delve on that matter. Maybe he should seek repentance for this 100 years of ideology and say that, well, they refuse and reject this ideology. I would not dispute with him or agree with him or disagree. I believe that he needs to specify what exactly he meant. At the same time, we have our own opinion. This habitual order that is habitual to the West, the ones that they call the rules-based order, imposing rules, standards, and norms that are developed without equal participation of all interested parties. That is exactly the approach that Germany and its European EU and NATO allies have been advancing in relations with third countries, and they've been advocating this in the international arena. In other words, that is the order building upon the right of the might, with all the emanating consequences. Given the drastic transformation of the modern world, such world order, namely the rules-based order, is doomed. Hardly anyone can claim that he cannot see this trend, because Russia has been saying that for quite some time. As a result, the Euro-Atlantic system that is habitual to Germany is becoming a thing of the past. The European security concept has lost every sense. It has failed. Namely, it is visible in terms of Ukraine. Once the West has unleashed an unprovoked hybrid aggression against Russia, allegedly as a response to the special military operation, although it was in the works for quite some time, it became clear that the previous security model building upon the Euro-Atlantic institutions ceased to exist. It simply collapsed, and current security system in Europe, while they try to make it seem that they created without Russia, but actually they built it against Russia. And the central element to that, as they see it, is the entirely hostile NATO bloc, hostile towards Russia, because this was the initial goal when it was first developed. That was stated by Friedrich Merz. At the same time, they accelerate the militarization of the EU, and there are bold statements that are made that soon there will be a big war against Russia. At the same time, NATO countries and the EU try to turn Eurasia into an arena of geopolitical confrontation, and the goal of these destructive actions is to preserve their dominance, as they believe that it is everlasting, but we believe that it has already faded away. And against this backdrop, Russia believes that our strategic framework and guideline is to shape a flexible and sustainable architecture of equal and indivisible security and cooperation in Eurasia that would fit modern challenges. That is the initiative proposed by President Putin of Russia. The all-Eurasian continental approach provides for account for legitimate aspirations of all Eurasian states and building upon the fair balance of these aspirations. That is the idea behind Russia-Belarus idea of the European Charter of Diversity and Multipolarity in the 21st century. That is to outline the principles of interstate communication and security. As you know, Sergei Lavrov, Foreign Minister Lavrov, came up with these proposals at the third Minsk Conference on Eurasian Security. We will definitely provide you with the link, and we're also talking about other materials that you can study in the section Eurasian Security. We'll provide you with the link.
So if we have a broader look, Russia has a clear idea of the image of the future in the concept of foreign policy of the Russian Federation. It's the framework task of forming a multipolar world order and its desirable parameters. We have already mentioned its key principles. I would repeat them: sovereign equality of states, non-interference in domestic affairs of independent countries, the right to choose the model of its development, and cultural and linguistic diversity, civilizational diversity of the world. Thank you very much, Madam Zakharova. Thank you very much. Is news.ru with us? Yes, news.ru is with you. We have two questions. The first one, just a second. Trump has supported the idea of sanctions against the trade partners of Russia. So far it have been statements, but how would Moscow react if such statements become a practice? So we have repeatedly stated that we comment on specific facts. Rhetoric can change even now in the United States of America, especially now. But it's about the harmful nature of illegitimate restrictive measures for the entire world economy and the prosperity of the countries themselves, the countries we qualify as sanctions aggressors, is becoming more and more evident with time, and it's just hostile policy towards our country. In the American establishment, there are still many people who count on the detained effect of the restrictions against us. They count on the results with the work with the third countries, on countering Russia, tightening the sanctions regime against Russia, and then face the denial of the hegemonist aspirations, but actually they do not see the reality. We have just been taught not only to survive, but to live and to develop. On multiple occasions, we have noted that it's just harmful for them, this denial of the reality, just to rest on the laurels that have already disappeared, to count on their dominant positions and just ignoring the interests of those who surround them, ignoring the situation in the world. It's just misguiding for them. The growing number of players who base on different models of development, countries, political figures and journalists, is just disgusting for them. Those calls not to buy something from Russia and to buy something from someone else. You just imagine, you go to a shop, you need a specific list of products. You know that a certain supplier is in the shop and you have actually a discount, and when someone from some corner, from some loudspeaker, they are crying out loud, just put this pack back, do not touch it. At the payment cashier point, you will just be made to leave this product, and we will provide you our own products, but it will be even more expensive, much more expensive. It's not just total control, it's total idiotism that is imposed under the disguise of some scientific, technical progress, democracy and so on. Actually, Orwell describes this as dictatorship, as totalitarian system. But it was just presented as a system that is not so hypocritical. It just did not conceal, it did not disguise itself as some other things. It did not conceal its true aspirations. But now it's more complicated, as totalitarian practices, they are disguised as some liberalist practices, and it's not all, because American dictatorship, it just speeds up the processes of diversification, reforming of production change, and currency reforms and reforms of payments. So just disruption of dollar payment. They're just prohibiting themselves to use dollar and some payment systems. It has become commonplace for them, but it's a flagrant violation of international law, because our country is a major exporter of the products and the energy resources much in demand globally. And it's difficult to predict how global market will react to additional sanctions and customs duties. We will continue to develop our economic ties with the interested states based on our own interests and not intimidations from the third countries. Our next question is about France this year not inviting again our representatives to the ceremony dedicated to the end of the First World War. How will we react on... What will our reaction be? Should our country participate in similar events, even if our country at some moment is invited there? Yes, I would confirm that, as Paris once again did not invite our representatives to the celebration, the ceremony for the First World War Victory Day. It's just hypocrisy. It was also about the ceremonies related to the Second World War. It's an attempt to forget about the immortal feats of our soldiers, to whom the entire Europe is obliged with its entire existence. It's just petty. It's not undignified for such a country that has such pretenses to be a great power and has is a permanent member of the UN Security Council. It's just an attempt to forget about the role of the Soviet Union. I would like just to mention the Nuremberg events. It was the statement of a son of one of representatives who covered this process, a public figure, a journalist, Mr. Dolgopolov, and he mentioned his father being a witness of those events in Nuremberg. He said that the French delegation actually did not participate much there because it was engaged there. It was involved by someone else. It was not an initiator, it did not aspire to anything, did not especially yield any results, but this delegation and the entire France was given a chance to have a seat among those who were the winners, who were condemning in some aspect, who were in Nuremberg those days, who were present there proudly as winners and not on the wrong side of the history. And during the First World War, it was the offensive of Russian troops in eastern Prussia that actually saved Paris. And it was France, it was the country that officially capitulated before the Third Reich. And after the Second World War, it turned into a winner and got the permanent seat in the UN Security Council. What it is doing there, you just see for yourself. So if those invitations are received, they will be duly considered. We believe that even if our today relations are in a deep crisis, it is our common duties to honor the memory of those who perished for the freedom of our states and our peoples. But I would like to note that for every anniversary of the First World War, the Russian embassy holds its own official ceremony. The Russian Expedition Corps, there is a monument on the bank of the Seine, and public figures, representatives of the public, gather there. And it's a testimony that we value military brothership of our peoples. And citizens of France, they treat carefully Soviet graves and memorials. And the French authorities duly keep the Russian burials and cooperate on the identification of the remains of Russian soldiers. Thank you very much for your response, for your reply. Is China media cooperation with us? Hello, Madam Zakharova, we are here. Madam Zakharova, I have two questions. The first one, despite the colleagues that have already been interested today in the Taiwan issue, I would like just to clarify something for myself. This behavior by Japan, and taking into account Tomahawk cruise missiles being purchased and fighter jets, do you think that could cause harm to Japan and the Asia-Pacific region as a whole? Actually, what Japan is doing right now, it's a testimony of the country being on the way of militarization that is sped up. It's a growth in military expenses, massive purchases of weapons, aggressive rhetoric, denial to recognize historic facts, and no regrets for what their ancestors have done, what their ancestors did 85 years ago and even earlier. We have regularly responded to those issues, your own questions and comments. I would mention the decision by Sanai Takaichi, the new Prime Minister, of integrated intelligence structures in Japan that will also fight spy activities of foreign states. But it's surprising, but such organization copies institutions created by militarist Japan in 1940, when the war was gaining momentum, the Second World War. What the result was, the result of the policy back then, we know very well. So if Tokyo does not want to find itself in the position of 1945, it should take into account the lessons of history and be based on the provisions of its own constitution. My second question, if you allow me, yes, of course. Since 2022, Indonesia, India and Brazil have chaired G20, and in 2025 this role will be taken by South Africa. And can we qualify it as the role of the Global South being strengthened in G20? And what's the estimation, Russian estimation of the role of China in strengthening the role of the Global South? And how can Russia and China expand coordination in the joint forming of the new world order, multipolar world order. So now, against the background of illegitimate sanctions restrictions, sanctions measures, Russia and China are countering such negative trends in the global economy, as we say, shoulder to shoulder. And in a broader sense, our joint steps is strengthening the role of the involvement of the global south in global trade. We're strengthening engagement within G20, APEC, BRICS, and the SCO, consolidation of the role of the global south, and stronger world, multipolar world order, and inclusive economic globalization. Our cooperation within the G20 is the role of the group as a leading platform for countering global financial and economic challenges and strengthening the just, fair, balanced global order. So it's about strengthening the role of South Africa in G20 and in BRICS. We are ready to support our African friends in many ways. Coordination between Moscow and Beijing is also done within the framework of APEC, which China will chair in 2026. We will further promote Putrija landmarks of the development of APEC until 2040, and we will further facilitate Asia-Pacific integration. Is Vestnik Kavkaza with us? Yes, hello, Madam Zakharova. We would like to ask a question about 3+3 meeting and the participation of the Russian side in that, and what's the significance that is given by Russia to 3+3 format. The Istanbul meeting that was held on the 18th of October 2024 among heads of the 3+3 format. The next ministerial meeting will be held in Baku or Yerevan, and we hope that Azerbaijani and Armenian partners will be able to determine who will hold the event this year, who will hold it next year. We will support the joint decision of the colleagues. There have been meetings in Abu Dhabi, Washington, Dushanbe, and we hope that such contacts will facilitate the resolution of this issue. As for our vision of 3+3 format, you know, it includes Azerbaijan, Armenia, Georgia, Russia, Iran, and Turkey. The development of the format continues. There have been 3 meetings. It's based on the principle of regional solutions to regional problems. It's about the cooperation and economy, energy, transport, culture, and active participation of all members, including Georgia, for whom the doors are open. It will facilitate stability and prosperity of the entire region. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Посольская жизнь, are you here with us? Hello, Madam Zakharova. Hello, fellow colleagues. I have one question. U.S. representative to NATO, Mr. Whitaker, on the 18th of November, in his interview with Bloomberg, calls Europe to reach the new level of aggressive behavior against Russia and to seize frozen Russian assets to ensure the funding of Ukraine for the years to come. What's your take on that? I believe that this is some kind of an attempt to copy Biden. You might recall, or rather you have just said that he called Europe to reach the new level of aggressive behavior against Russia. That's what Biden did. I do not know whether Whitaker is a Republican or a Democrat, but it would be a good thing to clarify who implements what policy in the U.S. currently, because apparently the current administration is demolishing the Biden legacy. They even put his portrait out of the White House, and apparently Biden had this ardent, staunch supporter, because Biden has always been proud of the fact that he made the EU introduce anti-Russian sanctions. We believe that any kind of deliberations of Matthew Whitaker on this matter are not appropriate, not because this narrative is criminal and detrimental, but clearly he doesn't have enough competence and mandate to give advice to any states, although we're not surprised at the level of cynicism and duality in the West, the way they speculate on this topic, the way they interpret or ignore the UN Charter and other international legal norms, including the provisions on sovereign immunity and immunity of assets of central banks and other assets, state assets. Washington representatives push other Western representatives, especially Europeans, so that they would launch an illegitimate chain reaction for seizing Russian state assets, which is just stealing. By doing so, they putting the whole brunt of negative economic, legal, reputation costs on the Europeans. And we're talking about financial costs primarily, as they go full on. At the same time, they are minimizing the repercussions. They do not tell them about the repercussions. They are keeping silent about them. They don't even talk about the destabilizing, clearly destabilizing effect for the dollar financial system, and experts said a lot about that already. Clearly, that is an attempt to squeeze Europeans, and that is due to the fact that Euro bureaucrats try to find pseudo-legal schemes to use the Russian assets to benefit the Kiev regime. Initially, they tried to confine themselves to seize Russian assets and to reinvest our assets. Now they are seriously talking about confiscating the assets per se, and they clearly recognize that they do not have money to fund the Zelensky gang. And nobody intends to borrow money for the new round of assistance. At the same time, we see that not everyone in the EU is ready to opt for this crime. They are scared of the associated risks. They will be detrimental. If they still decide to seize these assets, they will be the first to respond for the repercussions. This will be a heavy blow for the Eurozone and the investment climate in the EU member states. Europe is swiftly losing its competitive edge, and it will be no longer considered as a safe haven for financial assets. It will lose trust ultimately, and there is no legal way of seizing Russian assets. Such actions, according to any legal system, is an outright robbery and classical theft. All potential culprits and instigators should think twice before opting for such reckless and clearly criminal actions that will definitely be punished. Thank you. Viralk, are you here with us? Hello, Madam Zakharova. Hello. The Commission on Regulating Public Services of Armenia deprived the electric networks of Armenia of license despite the ruling of the International Arbitration in Stockholm. What's your take on these actions by the Armenian authorities against a company with Russian capital? We clearly closely follow the developments around the electric networks of Armenia and Samuel Karapetyan. The protection of interests of Russian business abroad is one of our utmost priorities. Moscow and Yerevan have established intergovernmental channels to discuss such issues. As for the company per se, let me note that over the past 20 years, the electric network of Armenia has been the leading stakeholder at the Armenian energy market. It provided jobs for 200,000 citizens. It paid taxes duly. Let me remind you that 10 years ago, Samuel Karapetyan became the leader of the company, and he paid out of his pocket, together with the government of Armenia, to make up for the gap due to the increased energy tariffs for the population and small business. Just to give you an example, from 2017 to 2023, to update infrastructure, the company spent almost $700 million. If we're talking in more specific terms, it spent over 680 million USD. From 2024 to 2034, they planned the investment was $795 million. Certainly, we do hope that new managers that are appointed by the Armenian authorities will be capable to provide more efficient models of governance, but you should judge by specific actions. Thank you. Thank you. Lenta.ru. Are you here with us? Hello. Good evening. I have one question. Thank you. Thank you for that. Head of the Polish military said that some kind of an enemy is looming. And what's your take on that? Who is this mysterious enemy, in your view? I've heard these statements. They can feel that the enemy is close and this enemy cannot be named. If you see things, then you need to pray for the Lord. We see that Polish authorities are intimidating their own citizens with threats that do not exist. I can only say that if they scare their people with Russia, they need to make a footnote or to say straight away that Warsaw is the one who severed relations with Russia. Currently, they have shut down another consulate general. Who initiated that? It was not Russia, definitely. Who closed consulates before that? It was Warsaw. Who supplies the Kiev regime with weaponry against Russia? Who participated in the anti-constitutional coup in Ukraine? It was Poland. What is the action by Russia that can be called a threat from an unnamed enemy? Name at least one action. They cannot do that. If they fulfill somebody's order, if they implement the will of other countries or simply their own political interests, or probably they get benefits from the West for that, they simply need to say it directly. They need not invent some hybrid language for that. Thank you so much. Thanks to you. Thank you. I would like to add, since we're talking about real enemies of Poland, there are real Poland enemies indeed, and these are those who drive a wedge between Poland and their neighbors, the ones who create this belt of instability around Poland as they fuel contacts on the European continent. The real enemies of Poland are those who do not let Poland use the resources of neighboring countries to trade with neighboring countries, to actively develop the markets, import markets and export markets, to develop their cooperation, industrial cooperation. These are real enemies of Poland. Those who do their utmost to deprive the European continent from common, indivisible security in order to push Western Europe against Central Europe ad infinitum and against the eastern part of Eurasia, so that Eurasia would not be brought together within the common cooperation. And these are real enemies of Poland and of the Polish people. They should definitely find and search for them inside their society and outside them. I named them, unlike the head of the Polish General Staff, General Kukula. Голос Отечества, are you here with us? Hello, Madam Zakharova, we are here with you, Anastasia Abramova. We have two questions today. The first goes as follows. The European Commission started shaping a new intelligence unit that will be under direct supervision of Ursula von der Leyen in order to strengthen the security of the European Union, but the initiative already raises questions among the European Foreign Policy Agency. It is concerned that the functions could be duplicated. Such strengthening of intelligence entities within the EU reflects the trend that the EU is turning from a political and economic union into some kind of a military and political bloc. Do you think that that is the real protection of Europe or the policy to militarize Europe? Of course not. The real task is to strengthen its sovereignty. Now we see that Western Europe has lost its sovereignty, economy, politically wise, in terms of security, in terms of humanitarian development. Not so long ago, the EU has been associated with a union where member states dealt with economic and social development of Europe. That was about strengthening Europe. They addressed tasks that were the cornerstone tasks for the European Union, and not the kind of tasks that were developed as allegedly their own path. Today, the EU leadership is obsessed with political issues and aggressive means to put them into practice. We're talking about the militarization of key institutions and industrial capabilities, turning the EU into a military and political bloc or an economic unit of NATO. The initiative to strengthen military and intelligence services is only part of this process that is not justified and that is destructive for the European economy. At the same time, the EU does not say a word that this large-scale borrowings will be a huge burden for the future generations of Europeans, and in order to justify growing exorbitant military expenditures, they cite fears facing the Russian threat, as they put it. Brussels has fit itself into this confrontation scenario that it invented. This deterrence of Russia and inflicting a strategic defeat upon Russia has turned into a mania, a phobia. The idea of a looming conflict against Russia is introduced in the public consciousness, or they should recognize that that's what they want to have. They either need to recognize that that is an inevitable future, and they have nothing to do with that. Russia is to blame for everything. And they should recognize that that is a lie. The alarmist military rhetorics and the manipulation of fear among the population is something that is actively used by European political elites in order to distract the public from social and economic issues, to fight domestic political opponents, to oppress dissent, and to keep themselves in power at the end of the day. Thank you for your answer. And the second question, if I may, what's your take on Russia-Greek relations at this stage in time, given the following fact? Prime Minister of Greece, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, and Zelensky, who came recently to Athens, discussed cooperation in defense and agreed to cooperate in the development and the use of naval drones. Actually, a new stage has started, although previously there were problems, but this stage has started in 2022. The Greek government pursues a confrontational course against Russia. Just to give you an example, Athens were the first to send weapons and munitions to Ukraine, and the Ukrainian armed forces use it daily against civilians in Donbas, Zaporozhye, Kherson region, Crimea, and other regions of our country, despite the fact that for many centuries the Greek diaspora has been living there. It is huge, it is peaceful, they love their historical motherland, they love their country. And for all their lives, they've been strengthening contacts and ties. It has never instigated any negative scenarios and trends. However, Athens didn't think about them. They didn't think that their brothers and sisters lived there. They have ties with their families in Greece. Due to actions of Athens, they have a lot of problems or even challenges for their health and life. And another case in point is the arrangement with the Nazi Kiev regime on the 17th of November on the development of use of naval drones. And this step, just like other anti-Russian actions by the collective West in order to inflict a strategic defeat of Russia on the battlefield, was assessed by the Russian side, and you will also get the appropriate response. Thank you for your question. We have our shared motherland. Rudolf, are you here with us?
Thanks a lot for giving me the opportunity. I have
Yes, hello.
My first one is that on Monday, Russian foreign minister and his Iranian counterpart held a phone call. Part of their discussion was Iranian nuclear program and the negotiations related to that. As Russia, how do you support Iran to enter the negotiations again with International Atomic Energy Agency and Western countries? How could you ensure that they will not be attacked while being in the negotiations?
Russia remains firmly committed to an active search for political and diplomatic solutions regarding the settlement around the Iranian nuclear program. We have repeatedly warned that military provocations are dangerous. They create stability and security threats in the Middle East, and we focused that military strikes against nuclear facilities, especially under the IAEA guarantees, are unacceptable. The U.S. actions and the actions of their like-minded nations that cynically claimed that West Jerusalem has the right to have preventive strikes on the Islamic Republic of Iran for self-defense, that's how they put it, not only led to the dire crisis in the international non-proliferation regime, they simply undermined the framework of the non-proliferation treaty that Tehran has always strictly respected. And by the way, the international community confirmed that always, including the IAEA. We pay tribute to the position of the Iranian side, despite the external forces by hook or by crook to sow discord in the Iranian society, it sticks to the policy, namely, it's best to reach an agreement than to wage a war, and the national interest could be efficiently defended at the negotiating table if the dialogue is on an equal footing and if a due account for mutual concerns is taken into account. In order to change the situation, in order to launch this process, Iranians need to have ironclad guarantees that their nuclear infrastructure facilities would not face missile strikes once again. Basically, there is nothing unnatural in their demands. Everything falls within the classic diplomacy framework, and you can use it in a constructive way if Western colleagues are committed to constructive political work. The Western countries should get rid of the language of sanctions, ultimatums, destructions. They get back to diplomacy, and building upon that, they should reach an agreement to overcome any suspicions regarding the Iranian nuclear program, paying due respect for the international law and including the right of Iran to enrich uranium under international control. That is something that all efforts should be focused on.
My second question is that some of Russian oil companies has been sanctioned by the US and other Western countries. How do you ensure that these sanctions will have no effect on the oil and gas production by those companies in Iraq?
You know, this question, it falls within the scope of the economic operators themselves. I would recommend you to request their comment. We can provide you their contacts. But I would remind that yesterday this issue was commented by Alexander Novak, Deputy Head of Government of the Russian Federation. He said that anti-Russian sanctions did not influence oil production in Russia. There is no decrease in oil production on daily statistics, and the total volume is even bigger than last month, and there were currently no corrections. And there is other quotation that Russia is not going to voluntarily cut oil production and works within the agreements of OPEC+.
President Vladimir Putin awarded Mr. Rashad Milan a medal, and you have been talking about your relations with KRG in Iraq and other Kurdish parties and forces. How do you see the role of Kurdish people in Russia? In which fields do you think they might have the most impact? Also, how will you try to improve your relations with Kurdish parties and authorities in the Middle East?
4 ноября, как вы знаете, в ходе традиционной...
As you know, on the 4th of November, during the traditional award ceremony in the Kremlin, Russian President Vladimir Putin awarded to Rashid Miran, a well-known ethnographer and translator, well-known in the Kurdish Autonomous Region and in Iraq as a whole. He awarded him the Pushkin medal. He is renowned for his input into the popularization of the Russian language and Russian culture, and we are interested in closer interaction of people of Russia and Iraq in other areas as well, and we engage closely with the authorities of Iraq and with the leading politicians of this country, including, of course, the Kurdish forces. As you know, Russia is a multinational state, and among them, a major place is held by the 50,000 Kurdish community. And if we are talking about external countries, foreign states where the Kurds reside, and for us as Russian citizens who have all the possibilities, opportunities to keep their culture, who are proud of their culture. And the Russian legislation and the policy of our country facilitates that in all the means possible. Actually, I have many people I know who are Kurds, who are citizens of our country, who live in our country.
Have a nice day.
Спасибо вам большое, до свидания. С нами ли автор И?
Thank you very much. Goodbye. Is author I with us? Yes, hello. That's author I here. You have already replied in detail about the shipments of Rafale fighter jets by France. And regarding vivid failure of MI6 operation, regarding stealing of Kinjal hypersonic missile in Romania, so London keeps silent about that. Do they have any reaction? Are you aware of some reaction of theirs? Actually, it's obvious, but regarding the actions by France, I would assess those actions as monkey business. Those promises to ship hundreds, as they say, Rafale fighter jets. So if you translate it into Russian, it's some emptiness. So it's just some labor that yields no results. But if they earn something of that, if such manipulation brings some money, but the question is which money and to whom? Excuse me, for the European security, those shipments, how dangerous are they? But you know, whoever makes such statements, our statements are the same. Whatever is shipped to Ukraine with the aim of strikes against Russia, with the aim of terrorist attacks, we will consider that as a legal aim. We have already conveyed this information. They have understood that, and they observe this based on the example of their tanks, of their drones, and the other weapons they ship. Now, regarding heavy supplies of weapons to Ukraine, as they said that it will bring the peace closer. There is a caricature about a wolf hugging a sheep and telling, "Poor thing, you are cold. I will make you warmer, and for that I will eat you, for you not to be cold." And that's the same thing. To bring the peace closer, to dissuade the Kiev regime, to prevent their participation in negotiations, and supplying weapons with the understanding that it kills the citizens of Ukraine. So it's a staged story, explanation for their own citizens. Those who are guided by such logics or do not understand the genesis of the Ukrainian conflict, the grounds for the Russian special military operation beginning, they're just hypocritical, or they pursue their own basic interests. And any observer who is impartial understands that in the West, books are published on that crisis. Italy, France, Chile, and other countries in the world. They publish books and involvement of Ukraine in NATO. It's just reaching the skeptical layers of the population, militarization of Ukraine, fundamental threats created for the security of the Russian Federation. And Russia should react to such steps. And such shipments by France to the Kiev regime, they do not facilitate the resolution of the conflict, but lead to its prolongation and its escalation. I think everyone should be aware that Paris is doing that intentionally. The plans announced in Paris have not become unexpected for us. We have long been convinced that France is one of the main parties behind this conflict. There were attempts of intimidation by the French authorities and the so-called coalition of the willing. In recent days, there have been statements by French Defense Minister Catherine Vautrin, the head of the General Staff Fabien Mandon, and the head of intelligence Nicolas Lerner. Its involvement of more and more military contingents in preparations on the eastern flank of NATO. So if it's for some defense purposes, it's not convincing. They are not hiding their plans to impose a strategic defeat on Russia. What defense are they talking about as they are attacking themselves? So do you have any other questions? It's about London. We have not seen any reaction by the British authorities through any official bodies on this large-scale provocation by the intelligence office of Ukraine's defense ministry and their British curators. But it's traditional for the British to abstain from comments on the topics that are not convenient for them. There are no requests by Bloomberg, no comments by the BBC. It's not heard by them, it's not interesting for them, because it's obvious failure of British special services. It's not convenient for them, obviously, to comment upon their harmful activities, just pushing towards a new dangerous age, leading to another global conflict. It's just the flexibility of their lives and their readiness to obey the British orders. And it's also participation in harmful activities. And London actually made sacrifices for their geopolitical interests. And this gentleman-like approach, they will sacrifice them as well when British strategy makers will need that. Europe needs to become an adult.